So, hello, very nice to be here. Welcome, everyone. The theme of this webinar is that 69% of people feel that they lack the self-confidence to really fulfill their potential. And just so you know, I did some fancy math. This is from a Gallup poll, and it was really looking at two different cohorts. And it's 59% of men feel they lack the self-confidence to fulfill their potential, and 79% of women feel that they lack the self-confidence to fulfill their potential. And so this webinar is intended to beat those odds, to equip you with mindsets and tools that will really boost the self-confidence so you take the risks to get what you want and live the life that corresponds to your vision for yourself. The first thing is, like, what happens if you don't have self-confidence? The obvious things are, you don't get the job that you want, possibly because you don't even apply for the job. You don't get the promotion. You don't get the raise you deserve. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't get the clients. If you're on the dating scene, you don't ask that cutie out that you've had your eyes on because you don't think you're good enough, basically. So that's, the broad strokes of lacking self-confidence. But lacking self-confidence also comes out in more subtle ways. If, let's say, you're in a meeting and in a team meeting and everyone has decided to go in a certain direction for a project, but you think that direction is a little bit suboptimal, and you have an idea, an original idea that would take the project in a new direction and a more successful one. If you lack self-confidence and everyone else seems to be on board with what they're thinking, you won't speak up. If you have a friend who's discharging their problems to you and you see possible new ways of thinking about something, but you don't trust yourself to speak out, then the situation will continue as it was. And I'm not saying that every time you exert self-confidence, you will necessarily come to a great success, but certainly you raise the possibility of achieving that success. And not failure is guaranteed, but the nothing is guaranteed if you don't try. And it's sort of been the deathbed regret of most people. Not that they failed at things, but that they didn't even try to achieve them. So once you integrate more self-confidence into your life, this really gives you that strength of certainty to try new things, to go after what you want, to live the life that really corresponds to who you are and what your feelings are inside. So these are all the things that you can have when you have more self-confidence. And hopefully through this webinar, you'll pick up a few insights along the way. Now, who am I to be talking about self-confidence, right? So I'll give you a little short biographical insight into myself. So what you need to know is when I was about 27 years old, I chucked my promising career in academia here in Montreal, and I went off to live in Berlin, Germany, because I was following my heart for love. And it was a really wild experience. I was determined to learn German, to integrate into German society, and to just sort of become part of the world there. And I had a really great adventure. The love was amazing, but finally it ended. And when it ended, I was sort of left alone to my own devices in Germany, and I decided I didn't want to go back to Canada. And as life would have it, I got a great business opportunity, and I founded my own business. And that business grew, and I got more successful. And as I got more successful, I had to hire more people. And I built a reputation for myself. I built a thriving business. And when my time after COVID came, I didn't chuck everything. I still have my business in Germany, but I did an about face and I came back to Canada and I'm starting again everything from scratch in Canada. And that also requires a certain self-confidence and a certain faith that things will work out. And also, while I was in Europe between 2017 and 2019, I was a fundraiser for an international arts project called No Borders Orchestra. I was fundraising. I got a nice chunk of money from quite a generous donation from the German Foreign Ministry, from embassies in the Balkans. I co-negotiated a collaboration with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which was wild. And that also, all of that required certain self-confidence, certain moxie to go in and make those requests. And it didn't all work out. I mean, I got some money, not all the money that we ever wanted. But again, the motor was that faith that things would work out. So I want to really quickly make a distinction now between self-confidence on one hand and self-esteem. So what is self-confidence? We can sort of define it broadly, according to the research, as the positive regard you have for your skills, abilities, competences, and resources. And it divides into two categories. It's very complicated. Get out a pen and paper. One is general self-confidence, and the other is specific self-confidence. So general self-confidence will be the basic positive regard, faith you have in your abilities, skills, competences, and resources to meet the challenges that life throws at you in general. And then specific self-confidence is the positive regard you have for your skills, abilities, competences, and resources in specific situations. So for example, I'm a confident teacher. So I'm pretty confident that if I explain a point of grammar in the English language, you will understand, because I've been doing this for 15 cajillion years. If, however, you give me a calculus problem, I have zero confidence that I will be able to solve it because I know that I'm not very good at math. And so what's important here is to separate sometimes the specific self-confidence from the general self-confidence. Because if I get into a situation where my specific self-confidence gets shaken, I need to remember that that doesn't affect my general self-confidence, that I'm still a capable person. And if there was a failure or a problem that arose in one specific area, that doesn't reflect on the general self-confidence. I also want to make the distinction now between self-confidence and self-esteem. So while self-confidence is the positive regard for your skills, abilities, competences, and resources, and your way in the world, it's a very social quality. Self-esteem is more the positive regard you have for your value or worth as a human being, regardless of your accomplishments. And so the two are separate, and while they can certainly support each other positively or negatively, they don't really always reflect one another. And this is, I mean, it's almost a cliche, but if you think of maybe certain actors or prominent people, they talk about having all the confidence in the world to go on stage or in front of a camera or to schmooze and network, but inside they feel hollow and empty and worthless. So, and Jim Carrey is an example of a celebrity who talks about that. And so the self-confidence is real, but it is not a metric for the self-esteem. And in this case, I'm not going to talk about self-esteem. I'm going to focus on self-confidence. Self-confidence it's something that you can also prove and affirm in the world through your actions. But what is it that undermines the self-confidence? Why do we have this negative self-talk that tells us, you can't do it, you're not good enough, you won't succeed. Why are we prone to negative thinking? Now, of course, some of it goes back to our family of origins, what happened to us in our formative years. And I can't speak to that. That's too big and also too specific to each individual. But there is an evolutionary root as well. It's almost in our biology to have a certain negative self-talk. And the reason for that is in prehistoric times, life was fraught with danger. The natural world was a dangerous place to be in. If you were a man, you would go out hunting, with your tribesmen, and you'd be confronted with these huge, scary animals with their big tusks and unpredictable behavior. And you had to also be aware of everything in your environment. It was a dangerous endeavor, and it was legitimate to have that real fear of what might happen. Meanwhile, the women in prehistoric times were gathering food and taking care of the home front, but that was equally fraught with danger. If you were picking berries or mushrooms or herbs, you had to be able to distinguish the good ones from the poisonous ones. You had to be constantly vigilant. And while you were out there, you had to make sure you didn't step on a spider or wake up a snake. And when you bent down to pick up a mushroom, make sure that a tiger didn't come jumping over the bushes. So it was all very dangerous, and the fear was there to keep us alive. It was instinctive and it was protective. And that wiring has come with us through the ages. Now, that's the first root of our tendency towards fear and negative thinking. The second is, what is the greatest fear of most human beings? And if you have an idea, you can write it in the chat. What do we still, from the beginning of time to now, what is the greatest anxiety that we have? I'm going to give you 5 seconds to throw something out. Social rejection. Exactly. Well done. To be expelled from the group, to be excluded, to be socially ostracized. These are all the things that create a crippling fear in us. And it relates back to the first fearful mindset. Because in prehistoric times, if we were ejected from the group, that spelled our imminent death. That we could not eat, we could not clothe ourselves, we could not build shelter without our group. And as history progressed, exclusion or expulsion or exile remained a major form of punishment on a par with death. And if you think about it, up until about 5 seconds ago, it wasn't like, when Cicero was expelled from Rome, he didn't think, oh, well, I'll just, go to Barcelona and take a picture of my tapas and post it on Facebook, living my best life, #. It wasn't like that. You were thrown out into a social wild, but it was still the wild where you were kind of friendless and alone. And life was extremely difficult in those circumstances. So we're hardwired to be fearful. We're also hardwired to live in community, which is why we're hardwired for connection. Now, an odd thing has happened in this human race of ours, because we have gone very individualistic. Maybe the pendulum has swung a bit too far in that direction, but for us, it's become very important to prove ourselves as individuals. And as exciting and thrilling as that is, and as much as it responds also to a need to be true to ourselves, it is a little bit at cross purposes with that other need to belong to a group and to fit in. So when we are faced with a situation where we need to stick our necks out and say, hey, I have a different idea, I have a unique or original idea, all those old fears and anxieties, those primordial anxieties, get triggered. Why are you sticking your neck out? Just keep it back in, because if you stick your neck out, chances are your head will get chopped off. But that's the reality we live in. We live in a world where we do need to and want to assert ourselves. So, how do we get comfortable with that given our natural drives? Well, one of the ways that we get comfortable with that is that we initiate a paradigm shift. So while it was previously, I mean, really up until 5 seconds ago, the norm to want to fit in and not take the risk to show our uniqueness, now I would say it's encouraged. And one thing that we need to do on that journey is welcome a paradigm shift to go from I need to fit in at all costs to let me be self-aware. What is actually happening inside me? What are my drives, my vision, my desires? And how can I accept them to go from self-awareness to self-acceptance? Brene Brown has a line. She says, "I am not other people's opinion of me." That we are now called at this point in our development, we are called to recognize who we are and accept who we are. And what's interesting, if you're on a sort of growth journey, is what we've noticed in monitoring the effects of coaching, for example, is that it requires self-acceptance to initiate a transformation. So self-awareness and self-acceptance are key to feeling good in yourself and also to initiating transformation, but on your own terms. So that's the basic paradigm shift that I would wish for everyone, because it is also the bedrock of self-confidence. That once you know who you are and accept who you are, that's when you can really start working on your behavior to come across in a self-confident way. So, on that note, I would like to share the 5 mechanisms with you to cultivate self-confidence in your daily lives. Now, the first 3 are a bit more abstract. It's a little bit more about inner work. And then the last 2 are focused more on real actions that you can take in life. And once we go through those mechanisms, I'm also going to throw in a couple of coaching hacks so that you can apply just in real time, given if the situation demands it. So what is the first technique? The first technique in cultivating self-confidence is to be the arbiter of who you are. And this goes back to the self-awareness and self-acceptance. But it's really that you decide who you are and who you are not. And this is really important because very often in life, people get an impression of us and they try to push us into performing what they think that role is. And sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not. And the point is that we are the ones who decide. So to be the arbiter of who you are. What goes hand in hand with that is to set down boundaries. So to be the arbiter is that inner work. I know who I am, and I'm not other people's opinion of me. And then this next work of putting down boundaries becomes more social. It's to show people, hey, you can come up until here and no further. Or again, to quote Brene Brown, I decide what's okay and what's not okay. And one of the reasons that boundaries has become so important, I think, is that, when we were a more community-oriented culture or more collectively minded, the social mores were given to us. So we all more or less knew how to behave with one another. We all, whether we liked it or not, we accepted those social mores. And nowadays, we've gotten to be so individualistic that sort of like everyone's boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay is different per person. And so we're all sort of trying to figure out, what's okay. And so sometimes people cross our boundaries, maybe because they're assholes, or maybe they just don't know, like they're really be innocently trying to get closer to us, but unwittingly cross a boundary. So we have to put those up and show other people, hey, this is okay and this is not okay, FYI. So what's important is also that you don't make it always. I mean, sometimes you have to make it a zero-sum game. Either you respect this boundary or I'm out. But you can assert a boundary and maintain the relationship. And one way to maintain the relationship while asserting boundaries is to act out of a spirit of generosity. And I think this is very important because when you're setting up boundaries, a lot of people, and I must say, I hear this very often from women, a lot of people have the fear that asserting the boundary will break the connection with someone. And so it's only by allowing people to overstep boundaries that we remain connected. And I think that's a fallacy. And I think there's another way of maintaining connection with people, and that's by acting in a spirit of generosity. So you assert a boundary, and then from that boundary, you give what you can. And there's that not a subtle difference, but a subtle balance. So if you've decided, for example, to prioritize a work-life balance, so you've signed up to work 40 hours a week, and that's what you're going to do. And the deal has to really be sweetened for you to work more than 40 hours a week. But within those 40 hours, you give it your all, and you're helpful to your coworkers. You're empathic both towards your team members and to your line managers. And you act in a way that is collective spirited. So those are the first three: to be the arbiter of who you are, to set down boundaries, to act in a spirit of generosity. And now the fourth, which gets a bit more practical, is set attainable goals for yourself. You set attainable goals for yourself and you put in milestones along the way. And the milestones are almost as important as the attainable goals. Here's why. Let's say you have to write a report, an 8-page report for work, and you're really not in the mood. Well, give yourself as a goal to write a page a day. And every paragraph, let's say there are 4 paragraphs in a page, every paragraph will be a milestone. The reason milestones are so important is that once you achieve a milestone, now, if you're trying to achieve a goal, your body is creating a lot of stress. So it's releasing a lot of adrenaline and noradrenaline, which are stressful, painful feelings. Once you hit a milestone, your brain releases dopamine. And what that means is that the dopamine suppresses the adrenaline and noradrenaline. So it reduces the pain effect, but it also gives you an energy boost. So it gives you the wherewithal to hit the next milestone. And again, when you hit the second milestone, you have the release of dopamine, which suppresses the stress and gives you the boost towards the next milestone and the next milestone. And so by the end of that first page, which is your goal, you might find that you have the energy and the drive to start a new page. You can even apply this in more mundane scenarios like cleaning the bathroom. You don't feel like doing it, but it must be done. And so every stage in the bathroom, the bathtub, the sink, the toilet, and the floors are milestones. And the same effect will happen. Once you clean each stage, your body will produce will produce dopamine and give you the energy and the motivation to go on to the next one. And at the end, whether it's the report or the bathroom, you come away thinking, you know what? I am a person who accomplishes their goals. And now the final technique. The final technique for increasing self-confidence goes back to what I said before, that while we are hardwired for fear, and the fear is instinctive and protective, and all the negative talk that goes around a dangerous situation or a fearful situation is actually designed to protect you. We are equally hardwired for connection, that we human beings were designed to live in community, and we were designed to be connected with people. And therefore, something that boosts your self-confidence and gives you that basic sense of things are going to be okay is if you nurture your positive relationships. Maya Angelou, the African-American, oh, here's Magdalena, all right. Welcome to the new person in the group. Oops, did she come? Did she not? We're running out of time anyway. Maya Angelou, the African-American writer, she gave a speech once. I think it was a commencement speech. You can find it on YouTube. And it's Maya Angelou, Bring Your Ancestors With You. And she says, when you go into an interview, when you go into a boardroom or a meeting or have to give a presentation, don't go alone in spirit. Go with your ancestors, go with your parents, go with your grandmother, go with your auntie, the people who mean a lot to you. And you'll feel that sense of strength gathered from the realization that you're not alone. And that strength, that inner strength, will be contagious. It will exude from you. You will project that sense of security. And it's how we were meant to be. It's how we were designed to be. So of course, you don't take those people physically with you, but you can keep them in mind. And at this point, this is where I can now segue into the coaching hacks. There's a really nice grounding exercise that I like that comes from embodiment coaching. And it's just if you put your feet on the floor, and you can do this standing or sitting. If you're standing, you loosen your knees. And if you're sitting, you just straighten your back, not so it's rigid, just comfortable. You feel your feet on the floor, put your hand on your stomach, take a deep breath in, exhale, say ah, close your eyes and think of the face of a person you love. And the reason I say think of the face rather than the person, if you think of the person, you might think of the whole history and dynamic and whatever else is happening in the relationship with that person. If you think with the face, you think of their presence. So they come with you. And it reminds you that you're not alone. It reminds you that you're in relation with at least one other person, if not many other people, in fact. So that's a really nice exercise that you can practice. There's another exercise, which I call the confidence pose. It's something I learned from Tony Robbins. And this pose is really interesting because it also taps into your body's natural ability to produce chemicals and hormones to your advantage. So if you stand up straight and you put your hands on your hips or your hands at the back of your head like this, and you keep your chin up and you stand like this for a good 2 minutes, what that will do is your body will increase its testosterone output by 20% in both men and women. And testosterone is the magic ingredient to self-confidence. So those are the hacks that you could use. Just if if you're going into a meeting, take 2 minutes by yourself in a quiet, private space. Ideally, people might think you're a little strange if you just walk or stand around like this in public. Up to you, your call. But if you do those positions, you will feel the testosterone course through your body and the self-confidence increase. So those are all the mechanisms and the techniques that I can offer you today to really boost your self-confidence. So the first thing is, right, be aware of your negative thoughts and self-talk, and realize that that is just an evolutionary function of the human brain. You're supposed to have it. And one thing that's good, I forgot to mention, but when you have those negative thoughts, it's helpful to label them. Because when you label a negative emotion, you reduce its potency by a good half. So when you're feeling that, or when you're hearing that negative self-talk going, and when you're feeling afraid, when you're feeling those fears, you can tell yourself, oh, I feel a little bit fearful, uncomfortable, afraid, anxious. That's my brain going off haywire, and I get it. And I know that it's actually trying to help me, but it's no longer serving its purpose. You can even talk to the fear. Say, hey, fear, thank you for showing up. I know you've really just got my back, but you're not serving me, and I need you to not be in the driver's seat. Can you please maybe get into the trunk is the best place for you. So negative thinking, the evolutionary roots of it. We have the paradigm shift for self-confidence in the world today, which is to go from this need to fit in and to be part of a group at all costs to being self-aware. This is who I am. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. These are my desires, and these are my aversions, and I accept it. And self-acceptance, we've learned, is the key moment that can initiate transformation. Self-awareness and self-acceptance are the bedrock for self-confidence. And then the 5 techniques for self-confidence are being the arbiter of who you are, you decide, not other people. Being able to set boundaries really clearly, but from the boundaries, act in a spirit of generosity. I'm going to move now to this way of holding up my fingers. 4 is to set goals and milestones, set attainable goals and milestones in your daily life so that you feel at the end like, hey, God damn it, I'm a person who accomplishes their goals. I attain my goals. And number 5, nurture your positive relationships. Then we looked at the grounding technique and also the confidence pose. Now, if you practice these techniques, I think you will already see, slowly but surely the confidence rising. If you want to go into more depth, contact me. We can talk about strategies for really boosting the self-confidence and making a clearer vision for what you want and how you want it and what terms you want them on. All right. On that note, everyone, have a really, really great afternoon.